Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome to today's Short War Summary. Now the Enforcer actually has taken the day off today. It is Monday, of course, it's our off day, and he's left me with a computer and a microphone, and today I'm going to cover the news from last night and also this morning. Now, obviously, a lot of people have been really uptight about this saga between Wagner and Russia, and everyone's watching very closely to see how this is going to end. And we've had some pretty interesting developments from the last time that we streamed that can cause some concern as to which way this actually is going to go. Now, just to recap real quick, the Wagner went into Russia with the stated goal of trying to topple the Russian government. That was what Prigozhin said, and also the Russians were very ill-equipped to try to stop it and basically used their police force and some very light SWAT team forces to try to stop them. Of course, Russia withheld some equipment, we found out, to try to defend Moscow in the event that something like this occurred. But of course, most of their forces are deployed within Ukraine, and they really don't have the resources to go out and defend their country properly, as we found out, and that Prigozhin so kindly unveiled for us. So, moving on to our first piece of news that we have here, we have a post from OSINT Defender. And we reported this last night on stream, but just to go over it one more time, Russian sources are stating that the Russian Minister of Defense, Sergey Shoigu, is currently under a form of house arrest. So, we're being told that the FSB and Russian investigators are keeping him confined to his house so that way they can continue to investigate what they allege is theft of military funding. We don't know if this is directly related to the deal struck between Prigozhin and Putin. All we know is that apparently Shoigu is under house arrest according to Russian Telegram channels. So, not totally shocking, but we need to keep an eye on this one to see if it's actually true. But that doesn't prevent the Russians from trying to create the image that their government is fully intact and Shoigu is still at work. Here we see a video of the first public appearance of the Russian defense minister, which is Shoigu, since the mutiny, or the Putiny, depending on what you want to call it. It shows Shoigu apparently checking the advanced command post of the Western group of forces, which are fighting in Ukraine. And we've seen several videos like this come out from Russia before. This is nothing new. This seems to be one of their favorite shots, is Shoigu looking out of an airplane window, acting like he's talking about stuff. We all know this is for the cameras. It's really not showing us anything of substance. But it shows us that Russia is trying to create the image that their government is still cohesive, which is not the case, very obviously. So, this is pretty much worthless to us at this point, and it doesn't prove that Shoigu is not under house arrest. It just proves that here's a video of Shoigu walking around basically with a ton of B-roll behind it. So, with that being covered, we're moving on to our next piece of news, which is a pretty big piece of news. We have sources in the Russian Prosecutor General's office telling the Russian state media TASS that the criminal case against Prigozhin hasn't been closed after all. And this was a huge piece of the deal brokered between Putin and Prigozhin, allegedly by Lukashenko, was that all the charges against Prigozhin would be dropped and he wouldn't be charged for treason. It now appears that Putin and his government is going back on that in a new twist of this a very in-depth saga, and they're going to try to charge him anyway. As far as we know, Prigozhin is in Belarus at this time, and he was last seen in the Green City Hotel in Minsk, which is the capital. It's unclear if this is actually true or not because there were no corroborating photo evidence to prove it, but that is what bystanders are saying. So it looks like there might not be amnesty for Prigozhin after all, and he could be screwed. And next up, we're going to see something that's also pretty interesting as well, which this one is from Null Reports on Twitter, who says, after a period of silence, Prigozhin made himself heard again via a long audio message. And I'm going to unmute this real quick. As you can hear, there is Prigozhin, also known as Prigozhin, talking about what is summarized here in this post. Sadly, it's not translated, so I can't play this whole video. It's about 11 minutes long, which is a little too long to cover in this video. So we're going to go over the summary real quick and see what he said. So Prigozhin's saying that the reason of his march is that Wagner was going to be disbanded on July 1st and that it was basically a protest. He says he started the protest to bring justice to those that made huge mistakes during this quote-unquote special operation that we know as a war, and he regrets shooting down the Russian aircraft and killing those pilots. And you'll see a little bit of conflicting information in the summary here in just a moment when I get down to the last bullet point. Prigozhin is basically saying that they had to shoot down and kill Russian pilots, and later he claims that they killed no troops. So the next bullet point says, none of the fighters of the Wagner PMC were forced to participate, and everyone knew how it would end. He also says that we did not reach 200 kilometers from Moscow, but we stopped at the moment when the 1st Assault Squad had already deployed its artillery on the approaches to the capital. He also says 2 factors influenced the stop of the march, and to me this is where it starts getting really shaky. One, he says that we did not want to spill Russian blood. And like I said, that is not true. They ended up killing about 15 Russian either pilots or ground forces in the midst of this attempted coup. And number 2, he says we went to demonstrate a protest and not to overthrow the government and the country. And that is also false as well, because if you recall, Prigozhin said he was going to march on Moscow, go and overthrow the government, and get rid of these corrupt people, including Shoigu mainly. And without naming him, he also alluded to Putin, because he said he would take out the president of Russia and replace him as well. So he took direct shots at basically the highest ranking people in the Russian government, and apparently expected to walk away scot-free from it. And then the last bullet point says, Lukashenko extended his hand and offered to find a solution to continue the work of the Wagner PMC. And this last part appears to be true. Everyone seems to agree that Lukashenko was the one that brokered the final peace solution between the two parties, and that Lukashenko eventually offered to house Prigozhin in Belarus, as we see now, and also basically house some of the Wagner PMC as well. So I definitely agree with the last line here. It says a story full of excuses. It's a story full of not only excuses, but also blatant lies as well from Prigozhin. So with that being said, we're moving on to our next piece of news, which ties directly into Belarus, Lukashenko, and Prigozhin. This one is from OSINT Defender, which says preparations are reportedly underway for the construction of a major operations base for the Wagner PMC group near the town of Osipovici, and I'm probably butchering that somewhat, so excuse me for that. And they're saying that this base will hold up to 8,000 Wagner fighters, and it's going to be 100 miles away from the border with Ukraine. And I know right off the bat, some people are going to be saying that they warned us of this a few days back. And I'm not going to say you're totally wrong. However, 100 miles away from the border is a pretty decent distance. It's not right on the border. It could be worse. But then again, it's not very comforting to see the Wagner building a base so close to Ukraine. It would be great if the Wagner would keep attacking Russia and not move into Belarus, because basically that doesn't help Ukraine at all. Now, on this, it's hard to say exactly what's going on. It could be the fact that Wagner simply has nowhere else to go and they're moving to Belarus. Or it could be the fact that maybe they are planning to do something to Ukraine and this is their new stationing point for it. It's just too early to know, and all that's basically speculation without any evidence behind it. All we know is that apparently a base is being built and some fighters are going to be housed there in it, and Prigozhin might be commanding the Wagner from Belarus in the future. So with that being said, we're moving on to our next piece of news, which says the British government is developing a plan of action in case of the sudden collapse of Russia, reports the Times. And this seems to be a pretty reasonable precaution, because with the Russian government being so unstable at this time, and also the Wagner trying to take over Moscow and unseat Putin basically, I would say you can't get much more unstable than that. That is a coup attempt by every definition. So the British are apparently making it public that they're creating contingency plans, which is whatever. But I would say that probably many other Western nations are doing so as well, but they're keeping it more quiet, kind of different than the British. So quite interesting, good precaution, and not much else to say about that one. So finally, we do have one more piece of news to cover, which is this one right here. And some of you are going to be disturbed about this, and some people are going to be okay with it because they understand the circumstances. But the Post says Zelensky has stated that there won't be a presidential election in Ukraine before the end of the war. And they also said that the election was originally scheduled to be held in the spring of 2024. And to me, I have to admit, I'm not super thrilled to see the fact that the elections in Ukraine are being suspended. To me, in a democracy, when we have to start suspending elections, it has to be pretty severe to do so. Now, of course, we don't know the situation on the ground in Ukraine when it comes to being able to hold this election. Obviously, they're in a war. That is going to block it up a little bit. But sometimes we've held elections during wars in democratic countries and we've been able to carry it out. In this instance, if it's physically impossible for Ukraine to carry out the election, then it's understandable. But also, this individual that posted this, Visegrad24, said it's nothing unusual. Great Britain also suspended their elections during World War II. And that is true. And I'm going to leave it up to everyone what they think about this. And we'll have to examine it later and see exactly what the explanation is for suspending these elections. But nonetheless, that is our last piece of news to cover for now. And we're going to be watching all the news throughout the day. Of course, there's probably going to be some pretty major developments between now and the stream, which will be held tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be covering that all on our Twitter page. So if you haven't, go and follow that Twitter page. It is over here at It's the Enforcer right here on Twitter. Go ahead and peep the Twitter, give us a follow, and also go and subscribe and like this video on our YouTube channel. And also, we'll see you in the next one. So thanks for watching, and bye-bye for now.